Hello and welcome to Indus News with me, Usman Lone. Well, we begin this bulletin with our top story, and that's Iran's Revolutionary Guards warning anti-government protesters of decisive action if protests over the hike in fuel prices continues. At least 2 people, including 1 police officer, have been killed during clashes over the weekend. In a statement, the Guards said they will take action against any continued moves to disturb the people's peace and security. Meanwhile, President Hassan Rouhani says the US is undermining Iran's security by declaring its support for the protests. Earlier, White House Press Secretary Stephanie Grisham said Washington supports Iranians in their peaceful protests. Germany has also urged Iran to respect legitimate protests and hold talks with the demonstrators. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei backed the decision to raise fuel prices and accused foreign forces of backing the demonstrations. Well, a trove of Iranian intelligence communications cables with their Iraqi counterparts have been leaked. The disclosures reveal Iran's influence in neighboring Iraq a decade after the US occupation. The leaked documents from 2014 and 2015 show how Tehran tried to influence Iraqi political affairs through its intelligence network. The 700 pages of secret intelligence reports are from Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. The files show Tehran's main goal in Iraq was to prevent it from breaking up. The leaked documents also reveal how Washington and Tehran became unlikely allies in the war against ISIS. The documents show Iran benefited from the intelligence gathered by the US presence in Iraq. Turkey has accused the Kurdish People's Protection Units of releasing over 800 ISIS militants inside Syria. In a statement, Turkey's defense ministry said NATO needs to realize Ankara is its only partner in Syria fighting ISIS. The defense ministry said Turkey fought alongside NATO and neutralized more than 4,000 ISIS members in Iraq and Syria. Ankara has repeatedly accused Kurdish units of releasing ISIS militants held in local prisons. Last week, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan just tried and failed to persuade Washington to cut ties with the Kurdish SDF. US President Donald Trump has revived his partnership with the SDF after leaving them in the lurch before Turkey's military operation in Syria. The Pentagon has teamed up with the Kurds to occupy Syrian oil reserves in the area, saying they're protecting them from ISIS. Well, Russia says it's returned 3 Ukrainian Navy ships it seized from the Kerch Strait in November last year. Ukraine asked Moscow to return the ships as a gesture of goodwill ahead of a 4-way peace summit on eastern Ukraine next month in Paris. The step has opened the way for the Normandy format talks between Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany. The Kremlin has also confirmed Russian President Vladimir Putin will take part in the Normandy summit on December the 9th. The meeting, which is mediated by France and Germany, is an attempt to advance efforts for a peaceful resolution to the conflict in eastern Ukraine. On Saturday, France said major progress has been made in peace talks after troops withdrew from parts of eastern Ukraine last week. Now, China has called on the US to stop flexing its muscles in the South China Sea and to avoid adding new uncertainties in Taiwan. At a closed-door meeting in Bangkok, China's Defense Minister Wei Feng urged his US counterpart, Mark Esper, to avoid escalating tensions in the region. Earlier, Esper publicly accused Beijing of increasingly resorting to coercion and intimidation to advance its strategic objectives in the region. The exchange came a day after China sailed a carrier group into the sensitive Taiwan Strait, led by its first domestically built aircraft carrier.
On the South China Sea, Minister Wei reaffirmed China's resolute determination to safeguard its territorial sovereignty and its maritime rights and interest in the South China Sea. China's resolute determination to maintaining peace and stability in the South China Sea and demands the US stop flexing its muscles in the South China Sea and do not provoke and escalate tensions in the South China Sea.
Well, for more on this issue, we're joined by our correspondent in Hong Kong, Grace Lee. Grace, thank you for joining us on Indus News. So, relations between China and the US have become increasingly strained over Taiwan and it seems now the South China Sea. How has this been reflected by their military behavior towards each other in the region, Grace?
Yeah, well, it's certainly been a contentious issue, especially as the two nations face off in this growing trade war as well. But comes to military might in the region, the U.S. has already said last year that China has pretty much complete control over the South China Sea. And a lot of the tensions going on there kind of point to this. The U.S. Trying some navigation expeditions there, but largely trying to stay out of China's radar when it comes to challenging China straight on. And so we're seeing them use a lot of kind of side alleyway tactics to kind of match China in its might. And that includes the big multi-billion-dollar arms sale that we saw that it engaged with Taiwan in, just to try and give Taiwan an edge when it comes to facing off with China. But it's not clear whether or not that will actually be effective, because China, as we saw in a lot of different photos and satellite images, it's completely militarized that area with its artificial islands, and the last time we checked, it's almost complete. So it'll be hard to challenge them in that region, even if Taiwan obtains some arms from the US, and that's pretty much worrying for Taiwan.
Grace, you say China fully claims the South China Sea, but you've also got many ASEAN member countries that are claiming to have the South China Sea under their territory. How has this affected their relations with China?
Well, a lot of experts are pointing to Vietnam as the one to watch when it comes to challenging China. Now, Vietnam does have a history of war with China, and it does have a very aggressive military. So far, it'll take a legal case to the UN and try its hand at international law when it comes to challenging China in this region. But of course, that's something that the Philippines tried a couple of years ago. They won the court case, but not much came out of it. So it's unclear whether or not this will give them an edge when it comes to the South China Sea.
Grace, we know the US and China are at a trade war also, and it looks like the US have pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Pact and isn't part of the RCEP trade deal either, which is covering East Asia. Do you think this has had a bearing on political issues between the US and China when it comes to the South China Sea?
Well, I think it's not just the TPP. I think it's also issues like how the U.S. handled North Korea, and also Donald Trump's impeachment hearings at the moment. All these are pretty strong indicators to Asian countries that, you know, the U.S. Can't really be bothered to handle the situation in this region. And so that's why we're seeing them pretty much go to the UN for help and find other agencies to give them a hand up when it comes to challenging China. But really, that signals a shift for China and the U.S. when it comes to the region as well. So I think as long as we have, you know, the Donald Trump presidency and the kind of scandals that it's embroiled in, we'll continue to see that China has the upper hand here.
Grace, thank you. That was our correspondent in Hong Kong, Grace Lee. Now, staying in Hong Kong, police have stormed the Polytechnic University, which has become a stronghold for protesters. They responded by throwing petrol bombs and stones and even shooting arrows at the police, who fired tear gas and used water cannons against them. Witnesses say no deaths or serious injuries occurred. Police say it arrested a few protesters and warned everyone in the area can be charged with rioting. Protesters set up hurdles on campus roads and built barricades. They set university entrances on fire to stop the police from entering and arresting people. The president of the university, Teng Jingguang, has asked protesters to leave the campus, assuring them the police will refrain from using force.
If the protesters do not initiate the use of force, the police will not initiate the use of force. In addition, we have also received permission from the police for you to leave the campus peacefully, and I will personally accompany you to the police station.
Well, China's weighed in and said no one should underestimate Beijing's will to safeguard its sovereignty and Hong Kong's stability. In a weekly briefing, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Geng Shuang repeated the country's commitment to the One China policy. This came after the US condemned the unjustified use of force in Hong Kong and called on Beijing to protect the territory's freedom. The White House said it urges all sides to refrain from violence and engage in constructive dialogue. Now, the International Criminal Court says it could open an investigation into alleged war crimes committed by the British Special Forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. This comes after new evidence was shared by the Iraq Historic Allegations Team. The ICC says it will begin a landmark case if it finds the UK government has been protecting soldiers from prosecution. The formal investigation by the ICC will mark the first time it has taken action against any UK nationals for war crimes. The cases include civilian murders and the mistreatment of detainees. The court has previously endorsed IHAT's report of war crimes by British troops in the year 2017. Britain's Ministry of Defence said it has cooperated fully with the ICC and sees no justification for further interventions by the International Court. Well, 4 Afghan soldiers have been wounded in a suicide attack close to a military training centre in the capital, Kabul. The Interior Ministry says the suicide bomber blew himself up in the police district of 19. No group yet has claimed responsibility for the attack. Last week, 12 people, including 3 children, were killed and 20 others wounded in a blast elsewhere in Kabul. Pakistan's President Arif Alvi has hit out at a former Indian military general for calling for the rape of Kashmiri women. In a TV debate, retired Major General S.P. Sinha endorsed rape and murder as legitimate military tactics. Sinha said Kashmiri women should be raped by Indians as retribution for the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. In a tweet, Alvi said people should imagine the fate of women in occupied Kashmir, where such men wield power with impunity. Quoting a Human Rights Watch report, Alvi said Indian forces have used rape as a weapon in the valley. Former Chief Minister of the Valley, Mehbooba Mufti, also condemned the comment. She said New India is baying for blood and rape. The occupied valley is reeling under a curfew and communications blackout for the last 106 days. Pakistan has successfully conducted a training launch of a new surface-to-surface ballistic missile. Military spokesperson Major General Asif Ghafoor said Shaheen-1 can deliver all types of warheads at a distance of up to 650 kilometers. He said the launch was aimed at testing the operational readiness of Pakistani's Army Strategic Forces Command. The spokesperson said the test was conducted to ensure Pakistan's credible minimum deterrence. Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world right after this short break, so do stay with us. Hello again, it's good to have you back. Now, a delegation of South Korean Buddhists have visited Lahore Museum in Pakistan to pay respect to ancient Buddhist relics. The 30-member delegation of the Jogye order, led by leader Ven Wan Heng, reached Pakistan on Saturday. The Khyber Pakhtunkhwa government says the delegation will also visit holy sites in Taxila, Mardan and Gilgit-Baltistan. It said the delegation will also meet Pakistan's President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan in Islamabad. The visit has been arranged by the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Ministry of Culture and Pakistan's embassy in Seoul. Well, for more on this story, we're joined by Sara Sarwar, who's head of Chancery in the Embassy of Pakistan in South Korea. Sara, thank you for joining us here on Indus News. So tell us, how did this pilgrimage go about being arranged between South Korea and Pakistan?
Regarding this visit, it has been a very hectic and tiresome job due to the efforts of our embassy and in particular the efforts of our ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Rahim Hayat Qureshi. Due to his untiring efforts, this visit was made possible. And it's not just that due to the efforts of our embassy, but also, if we look at Pakistan now, the situation is very stable there. Security is no more a concern. And that is the reason why visitors and tourists who intend to visit Pakistan, they show ready acceptance to visit Pakistan because of its security environment and because they're pretty much satisfied with it. And also the facilitative atmosphere that is being provided by the government of Pakistan due to its recent initiatives and its particular focus on tourism to bring tourism to Pakistan. This atmosphere, this conducive atmosphere has been able. That is the reason why we have been able to arrange this pilgrimage to Pakistan.
Sarah, not many people know, but there's also a huge, rich history of Buddhism in Pakistan and places like the Swat Valley. Tell us the religious significance of this pilgrimage to Pakistan by South Korean Buddhists.
Buddhist exchange between the two countries is very old. And if we look at this current visit, then, Pakistan is the center of Buddhism. Gandhara, which is now Pakistan, it was the center of Buddhism, and there was once the largest Buddhist population that was living in Pakistan. There are so many historical and archaeological sites that are of considerable value to the Buddhists all over the world, and in particular Korea. We have recently also discovered a sleeping Buddha, that is the oldest statue of sleeping Buddha in Bhamala. And there are so many other living sites. There is a Manthal rock in Gilgit, there is a sacred rock of Hunza. There are so many archaeological sites in Takht-e-Bahi, Mardan, Peshawar, that are so important and significant for these Buddhists that even recently we have seen that there was a Thai monk delegation that visited Pakistan, and there were monks from China who visited Pakistan, and now these Korean monks are visiting Pakistan. So, which shows that Pakistan has been a cradle of civilization, and it has been of significant value for this tourists that are going to Pakistan.
Sarah Sama, thank you so much for talking to us here on Indus News. Now, Islamabad's peace initiative, the Kartarpur Corridor, has boosted the number of Sikh pilgrims visiting holy sites in Pakistan. Indian media has reported that more pilgrims are visiting the Kartarpur shrine on weekends and religious days. According to government data shared by the Indian media, 1,800 people are scheduled to visit Kartarpur on Sunday, the 24th of November. On the 550th birth anniversary of Guru Nanak Dev, which was on the 12th of November, a total of 546 Indians made the trip. Now, in the United States, 4 people have been killed and 6 others wounded in a mass shooting at a football watch party in Fresno, California. Police say the gunman opened fire at people attending a backyard gathering. It's the second mass shooting in California in less than 24 hours after Sunday's assault killed 5 people of the same family. Well, Libya says it has deported 62 illegal immigrants to Chad and Sudan. The Immigration Control Department says the people were returned through the southern borders with Chad and Sudan. The International Organization for Migration says Libya hosts over 600,000 illegal immigrants. It says Libya holds 6,000 migrants, including women and children, in detention centers. Thousands of people, mostly Africans, use Libya as a staging point before crossing through to the Mediterranean Sea into Europe. Now in Belarus, the opposition has failed to win a single seat of the 110 constituencies contested in Sunday's parliamentary polls. Official election results show parties loyal to President Alexander Lukashenko won all of the seats. The opposition has also lost their previous 2 seats in the House after their prime candidates were barred by the government. The Election Commission reported a 77% turnout in yesterday's elections. President Alexander Lukashenko, who has ruled the country for the past 25 years, succeeded in maintaining his hold on power there. The polls are being viewed as a litmus test of transparency for the sanctions-hit country, which is looking to mend its ties with the West. Now, in other news, in Italy, Venice's state of emergency shows no sign of lifting after the city was hit by its 3rd very high tide in a week. The floodwater rose to 1.5 meters high. More in this report.
Venice's St. Mark's Square is flooded and closed for tourists. Churches, shops and homes have also been inundated. Strong storms and winds have battered the Renaissance city, with storm surges putting it underwater. Since 1872, the 1.5-meter level had never been touched twice in 1 year. Now it has been hit 3 times in a week.
We had lots of damages. For example, in my case, the electrical system went underwater, a lot of merchandise got lost, necklaces and other goods all underwater. We have to lift desks and drawers, rinse again and clean up.
The crisis has prompted the government to release $22 million to tackle the devastation. Many people have blamed the disaster on global warming as well as poor governance.
We had to blame certain politicians of the past. Unfortunately, we pay the consequences. This is the problem.
The local meteorological department says more rain is expected in Venice in the coming week, but tides and weather conditions will ease.
Now let's look at the latest business news, and in stock markets across Europe are trading flat amid an ongoing focus on developments in trade talks between the US and China. Investors are holding back as there's no major reports released today. The CAC 40 in Paris lost a fraction as investment company Wendel dropped over 1.5%. The drop was fueled by Citigroup's downgrade of its stock from buy to neutral. London's FTSE 100 index gained fractionally, while Frankfurt's DAX index is trading flat. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng index closed over 1% higher as shares of Chinese tech giant Tencent jumped over 2%. The Shanghai Composite also gained over 0.5% on hopes of a future stimulus package on central bank's rate cut. Well, it's 23 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's the news from Indus today, and that's all from me and the team here in Lahore for now. But don't forget, for the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.